Throughout history, there have always been rituals and artifacts involved in occult practices, some considered mere superstitions, others shrouded in inexplicable mysteries. The Liber Mortis is one such case. It is a dark grimoire that describes a spiritual game supposedly capable of establishing contact with entities beyond human comprehension. Unlike the Ouija board, which is already surrounded by disturbing accounts, this ritual carries an even darker reputation, as those who practice it may unknowingly be bargaining with their own souls. But what makes the Liber Mortis so dangerous? Are there historical records that prove its existence? And even more terrifying, why have people who attempted to play this game vanished without a trace? The name Liber Mortis, translated from Latin as Book of the Dead, suggests something far beyond a simple ritual manual. The very etymology hints at forbidden knowledge, a book capable of opening doors that should remain closed. Throughout history, various texts have been associated with this name, but the most feared of them appears to have emerged in medieval Europe, amidst occultist societies seeking answers from the beyond. Although its exact origin is uncertain, occult scholars believe that the Liber Mortis has connections with the ancient grimoires of the Renaissance, a period in which manuscripts like the Lemegeton and the Picatrix were used by alchemists and magicians. However, what sets the Liber Mortis apart is its purpose. It was not merely an invocation manual but a game, an interactive method of communicating with spiritual entities. The structure of the game is peculiar. Unlike the Ouija board, which uses a board and a moving pointer, the Liber Mortis required a physical book, which had to be held by the participants as the pages moved on their own, answering questions. According to ancient accounts, the book was to be placed on a sacred surface or directly on a human body, becoming a channel for the entity being summoned. But did these entities respond merely out of curiosity, or was there a hidden intent behind it? The oldest records speak of a silent contract formed upon starting the game. The entity not only responded but observed, analyzed, and, in some cases, proposed exchanges. There are reports describing participants who, by the end of the game, began experiencing strange dreams, recurring nightmares, and, in extreme cases, disappeared without explanation. The first mention of the Liber Mortis dates back to the 15th century, in treatises that referenced a forbidden game. One of the most disturbing texts was found in the archives of the Spanish Inquisition, describing a ritual in which 3 people held a book while inaudible whispers filled the room. Interestingly, these records were not written by occultists but by inquisitors persecuting heretical practices. If the Church considered the game a real danger, what does that mean? During the 19th century, explorers studying ancient manuscripts claimed to have found fragments of the Liber Mortis in the Vatican Library and private collections in Eastern Europe. What were these institutions trying to hide? The Vatican has always had a strict policy regarding documents related to the supernatural, and some believe this book might have been one of the many hidden texts within the Church's secret archives. But if the game truly existed, how was it played? The few accounts available indicate that, once started, there was no way to turn back. The biggest problem was that participants never knew exactly who they were communicating with. Unlike a Ouija board, where the names of entities could be spelled out, the Liber Mortis allowed an invisible force to take control of the pages, guiding players to enigmatic and often disturbing messages. And there is an even more concerning detail: the ritual could not be interrupted. Medieval documents contain warnings that leaving before the game is over could lead to a terrible fate. What happened to those who disobeyed this rule? Many believe that the game of Liber Mortis was more than just a means of communication. It could, in fact, have been a test imposed by the entities themselves, something akin to ancient legends about demonic pacts. Participants were not merely asking questions. They were, without realizing it, risking something, and that something could be their very soul. But if this game was so dangerous, why did its practice persist through the centuries? What drives someone to challenge the unknown, even knowing the risks? Is it merely curiosity, or is there something deeper drawing players to this dark ritual? Now that we understand the essence of the Liber Mortis, we must explore its shadowy origins. Who wrote this grimoire? Why was its existence concealed? And what do we know about those who dared to challenge its mysteries? When it comes to grimoires and occult texts, it is common to think of books that were simply destroyed or banned by the Church and other authorities of their time. But what if some of these manuscripts were never truly eradicated? What if, instead of being burned or prohibited, They were hidden, preserved, and copied by secret societies over the centuries. This seems to be the true story of the Liber Mortis, a book that vanishes from the official pages of history, only to mysteriously resurface in occult circles, in scattered fragments and accounts. Unlike classic grimoires such as the Ars Goetia or the Picatrix, which are widely studied and catalogued, the Liber Mortis appears to have been deliberately kept out of public knowledge. And this raises an important question. Who would have an interest in erasing its existence? Some researchers suggest that the Vatican itself may have played a key role in this suppression. Records indicate that in the 16th and 17th centuries, the Holy Office, the Inquisition's branch responsible for censorship and the investigation of heretical texts, maintained a secret list of books that were not to be destroyed but rather kept for internal study. Could the Liber Mortis have been one of them? Interestingly, documents from the Vatican secret archives mention a manuscript called Codex Obscura Mortis, described as dangerous to the soul and to the sanity of men. It is not available for public access, but scholars who have reviewed internal documents claim that its contents relate to rituals for contacting the dead. Could this manuscript be a hidden version of the Liber Mortis? The book's existence also appears to be linked to esoteric societies operating on the fringes of the Church. During the 18th century, the Order of the Rosicrucians and other occult fraternities mentioned a ritual called the spiritual door game, which involved a special book, possibly the Liber Mortis itself. Unlike other methods of spirit communication, this game did not require a protective circle or incantations, only the willingness to open the book and allow something to use it as a medium for manifestation. But what exactly was being manifested? Some evidence suggests that 19th century occultists, such as Eliphas Levi and Aleister Crowley, attempted to recreate the game described in the Liber Mortis. Crowley, in particular, believed that certain magical texts were alive, capable of transforming and interacting with their readers. In his journals, he describes a ritual involving a book that, when consulted, provided spontaneous responses. He never mentioned the Liber Mortis directly, but scholars of his work believe he may have sought a lost version of this grimoire. If Crowley and other occultists tried to recreate the Liber Mortis, does that mean the book disappeared? Not necessarily. There are contemporary reports suggesting that fragments of the book still circulate in private collections and, more recently, on the deep web. Some forums specializing in the occult discuss the existence of a digitized document, supposedly a partial copy of the Liber Mortis, allegedly found in a private collection in Romania. However, those who attempted to access the document report that it vanished mysteriously from the internet, reinforcing the theory that someone or something does not want its contents to be revealed. But there is an even more unsettling detail. Unlike other grimoires, which contain precise invocation instructions and magical seals, the Liber Mortis appears to have a mutable nature. Some scholars believe that the very act of reading it is already part of the ritual, functioning as a portal for communication with unknown entities. This could explain why so many different versions of the book have been mentioned throughout history. Perhaps it is not a fixed book, but rather a spiritual phenomenon that manifests differently for each generation. This leads to a disturbing question. If the Liber Mortis truly enables contact with entities beyond our comprehension, who exactly is on the other side? Was the book created for the purpose of occult knowledge, or is it a trap designed to ensnare those who dare to use it? Now that we understand its possible origins, we must examine the strange disappearances associated with the game. After all, what happened to those who tried to challenge its mysteries? Throughout the centuries, many occult texts have been linked to unexpected consequences, but few have a history as sinister as the Liber Mortis. Unlike other grimoires, which served merely as ritual guides, this book appears to have a direct connection to unexplained events and mysterious disappearances. Those who dare to play the so-called Game of the Dead often do not return to tell the story, and the few who do rarely remain the same. The first documented case of a disappearance related to the Liber Mortis dates back to the 17th century in France. 3 young nobles acquired a rare manuscript and decided to test a ritual described within it. Days later, only one of them was found, completely catatonic, murmuring incoherent phrases about voices coming from the book. But there is a detail that few know. Years later, this survivor reappeared in an isolated monastery, living as a hermit. He never spoke again about what happened that night, but records indicate that he spent hours writing indecipherable symbols on scraps of parchment. This case is not the only instance where a missing person returned under strange circumstances. In 1883, a group of British occultists known as the Order of the Black Veil attempted to recreate the Liber Mortis game in a private ritual. Only one member survived, and after the event, he was left completely blind. The strangest part was that, even without sight, he claimed he could see shadows moving around him, and that the book was alive. Witnesses from the time reported that when he passed away years later, his personal library spontaneously caught fire, as if something wanted to erase any trace of his knowledge. Another infamous case occurred in 1971 in Germany when a group of university students obtained fragments of the Liber Mortis and decided to test the ritual. They recorded the experience using a Super 8 camera, but the footage was later found abandoned in a school building, with no trace of the students. When analyzed, the tape revealed a disturbing scene. The group appeared to be reading the book when, suddenly, they began looking around, as if hearing something invisible. The last image captured was of one student abruptly raising his head and murmuring, "He has arrived," before the tape cut off. None of the participants were ever seen again. In recent years, reports have emerged suggesting that the ritual may not even require a physical book to function. In 2013, in Romania, a young man named Adrian Petrescu, a student of occult literature, gained access to a digitized version of the Liber Mortis. He decided to test the game during a video call with his friends. In the middle of the transmission, Adrian became motionless, as if in a trance, and stopped responding to messages. Minutes later, the call was cut off, and his computer remained on, but with no one in front of the camera. What makes this case even stranger is that 2 years later, Adrian mysteriously reappeared in a town 300 kilometers away, with no memory of what had happened. Doctors who examined him stated that his brain showed signs of accelerated aging, as if he had lived decades elsewhere. Had he truly disappeared, or had his mind been transported to another plane? Beyond the missing, there are those who claim to have attempted to rescue victims of the Liber Mortis. Occultist accounts suggest that certain esoteric societies have performed rituals aimed at calling back those who had been taken. In 2004, a group of paranormal researchers in Russia conducted an EVP, electronic voice phenomena, session at a location where a supposed Liber Mortis player had vanished. What they recorded was chilling, a whispering voice saying, "They didn't let me out." Could these disappearances be nothing more than mass hysteria, psychological effects, or even crimes covered up by supernatural legends? Or does the Liber Mortis truly act as a gateway to another dimension, a realm where time and reality do not function as we know them? If the book truly holds such power, it does not merely open a portal, it traps something within it. But what kind of entity would respond to such a call? And could there be something within religious and spiritual traditions that has long warned about the dangers of this kind of communication? Throughout history, various civilizations have warned about the dangers of attempting to communicate with the dead, but few have been as emphatic as the Judeo-Christian traditions. The Bible, in multiple passages, not only forbids necromancy but also suggests that deceptive forces may masquerade as the spirits of the deceased. This idea raises a disturbing question. Could the Liber Mortis be a trap where the entities summoned are not who they claim to be? In Leviticus 19 verse 31, the warning is clear. Do not turn to mediums or seek out spiritists, for you will be defiled by them. But what does this defilement mean? For the ancient Hebrews, any form of contact with the spiritual world without divine permission could result in the corruption of the soul. Not necessarily demonic possession, but a kind of spiritual degradation, where the person becomes influenced by external forces. This could explain why many victims of the Liber Mortis, even when they don't disappear, report drastic changes in their personality and behavior. The most famous case of necromancy in the Bible is the episode of Saul and the Witch of Endor, 1 Samuel 28. Desperate for guidance, King Saul ignores divine warnings and consults a medium to summon the spirit of the prophet Samuel. The apparition prophesies his death, and the next day, Saul is killed in battle. But there is something many overlook in this story. Was that entity truly Samuel? Some scholars believe it was not the prophet's spirit, but rather a being in disguise, manipulating Saul in his moment of desperation. This aligns perfectly with the accounts of the Liber Mortis, where players believe they are speaking with familiar spirits, but in reality, they may be interacting with something far more dangerous. This concept of deceptive entities also appears in the apocryphal Gospels, texts excluded from the official Bible but still studied by theologians. The Gospel of Nicodemus mentions imprisoned souls that attempt to deceive the living into joining them in the afterlife. This description is eerily similar to the accounts of Liber Mortis players, who claim to have heard voices pleading to be freed, only for those entities, once released, to reveal themselves as something completely different from what they had pretended to be. But this condemnation of contact with the dead is not limited to Christianity. In Jewish mysticism, the Sefer Harazim, an ancient Hebrew book of magic, warns that some books should not be read because they serve as portals to unknown spiritual realms. The Kabbalah also mentions the Qliphoth, entities that dwell in the darkest layers of existence and seek to deceive those who reach out to them. Could the Liber Mortis be one of these instruments of deception, used by forces trying to infiltrate the world of the living? Interestingly, it is not only sacred scriptures that warn about the dangers of certain books. During the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church maintained a list of forbidden grimoires, but not all were destroyed. Some were preserved in the Vatican secret archives, where clergy scholars analyzed them to understand their effects. Exorcists throughout different eras reported cases where possessed individuals claimed to have read a black book that opened doors to something they could not control. Could the Liber Mortis be one of these forbidden books, secretly studied by the Church? The fear of books with spiritual power is not exclusive to the West. In Tibet, the Bardo Thodol, known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes how spirits can present themselves in deceptive forms, trying to disorient souls crossing into the afterlife. In Tantric Hinduism, there are texts warning that certain mantras and symbols, if spoken or read without proper preparation, can invoke uncontrollable forces. This raises another question. What if the very act of reading the Liber Mortis is already part of the ritual, activating something invisible to the reader? Throughout the centuries, occultists who studied powerful grimoires always sought protection before opening these texts. Some alchemists recited specific prayers, while Kabbalists drew protective circles around themselves before handling books considered dangerous. But there is a crucial detail. There are no records of a safe ritual for reading the Liber Mortis. This suggests either that the game was designed to be impossible to interrupt, or that those who attempted to find a way to protect themselves never had the chance to share their discoveries. If there is anything more frightening than a forbidden book, it is a book with no instructions for defense. This reinforces the theory that the Liber Mortis was not merely created for communication with the dead, but rather to establish a permanent link between players and something far older. If this idea is true, it raises a chilling question. If the Liber Mortis truly acts as a portal to something unknown, are its players merely calling out to spirits, or are they the ones being called? Throughout history, humanity has attributed a special power to words, whether through enchantments, sacred scriptures, or forbidden texts. The idea that certain combinations of letters can influence the mind, open portals, or even summon invisible forces is present in various cultures and spiritual traditions. The Liber Mortis fits precisely into this category, a book that not only contains occult knowledge but can transform its reading into a ritualistic experience. But is this merely superstition, or is there something deeper behind this concept? If we analyze ancient cultures, we see that words have always been treated as living entities with the power to create, alter, and destroy realities. In ancient Egypt, for example, hieroglyphs were not just symbols but forms of magic that maintained the order of the universe. In Jewish mysticism, the Sefer Yetzirah, one of the oldest Kabbalistic texts, describes how the world was created through the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This concept suggests that writing is not merely a means of communication but a tool capable of shaping existence itself. Could the Liber Mortis be an artifact that exploits this power for unknown purposes? Beyond spiritual symbolism, there is a fascinating psychological aspect to this matter. Scientists studying the power of words have discovered that certain linguistic patterns can induce altered states of consciousness. One example is hypnotic language, used in neurolinguistic programming, NLP, and clinical hypnosis. Words arranged in a specific manner can alter the perception of reality, influence emotions, and even induce deep trances. This could explain why some people who came into contact with the Liber Mortis reported feeling as if their minds were being pulled into another dimension. Another intriguing factor is the effect of visual patterns on the human mind. Certain symbols, when observed for extended periods, can cause hallucinations, disorientation, and even a sense of an unseen presence. The Voynich manuscript, one of the world's most mysterious books, contains diagrams and patterns that some researchers claim have hypnotic properties. If the Liber Mortis follows the same logic, it is possible that its pages are not merely text but contain visual and linguistic triggers that activate unknown parts of the subconscious mind. But perhaps the most frightening aspect is that the concept of books as portals is not new. Throughout history, numerous texts have been considered gateways to the supernatural, either due to reports of strange events associated with them or because of their mysterious contents. One of the most famous examples is the Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible. According to legend, it was written by a monk in a single night after making a pact with Lucifer himself. What makes it intriguing is that many people who spent long periods studying the book reported disturbing nightmares and feelings of being watched. Another well-known case is the Necronomicon, a fictional grimoire created by writer H.P. Lovecraft, which gained such notoriety in occult circles that some believe a real counterpart exists, hidden in private collections. Interestingly, 20th century occultists attempted to recreate its rituals based on fragments and references from ancient texts. And what happened to some of these researchers? Reports indicate that many claimed to suffer spiritual attacks, mental disorientation, and, in extreme cases, mysterious disappearances. The idea that books can serve as spiritual portals also appears in religious texts. In Islam, the concept of al-Law al-Mahfuz, or the preserved tablet, suggests that there exists a divine book containing all knowledge of the past, present, and future. In Christianity, biblical passages mention the Book of Life, a sacred record in which the names of those who will be saved are written. What all these traditions seem to indicate is that certain texts are not just collections of words but tools that connect different planes of existence. However, there is an even more disturbing detail about the Liber Mortis. There are no records of a protection ritual for reading it. Traditional grimoires, such as the Key of Solomon, always include instructions for spiritual defense for those who dare to practice their magic. The Liber Mortis, however, never mentions how to interrupt the game or shield oneself from its consequences. This raises a sinister hypothesis. What if the game was designed to be impossible to stop? If this theory is correct, it means that anyone who reads the Liber Mortis is already participating in the game, whether they want or not. There are even reports that, even without officially playing, simply flipping through its pages can cause the reader to hear whispers, experience nightmares, or feel a presence nearby. This would indicate that the book functions as an automatic invitation to something on the other side, and accepting that invitation may be the last conscious choice a person ever makes. Given all of this, an even more terrifying question arises. Does the game actually need participants, or is it simply using the readers as a means to manifest itself in the real world? Stories of cursed books and forbidden rituals have always been part of human culture. From ancient medieval grimoires to supposedly vanished manuscripts, there is something about the idea of forbidden knowledge that sparks both curiosity and fear. Could the Liber Mortis be just another modern myth, an urban legend born from our obsession with the occult? Or is there some truth behind the reports of disappearances and unexplained phenomena? In many cases of mysterious legends and rituals, the real danger does not lie in the object itself, but in the mind of those who believe in it. Psychology has already demonstrated that fear and expectation can profoundly alter one's perception of reality. A phenomenon known as the ideomotor effect, for example, explains how the unconscious mind can influence physical actions without a person realizing it. This effect has been documented in experiments with the Ouija board, where participants believe a spirit is moving the planchette when, in reality, their own muscles are unconsciously responding. Could the Liber Mortis be just an extreme case of this effect, where collective fear amplifies the experience to the point of creating events that seem supernatural? However, there is something unusual about this particular game. Unlike other urban legends that emerge and disappear without a trace, the Liber Mortis reappears at different times and in different places, always with similar accounts. In 18th century esoteric societies, there were whispers of a grimoire capable of communicating with those who read it. In the archives of the Inquisition, documents describe a manuscript that altered its own content depending on who handled it. And in modern times, there are stories of digital files of the Liber Mortis mysteriously disappearing from the internet, as if they were being erased by something that does not want to be discovered. This leads to a disturbing question. Could certain books carry an energy of their own, capable of influencing reality? Some occultists believe so. The idea that a book can be more than just a physical object appears in various spiritual traditions. The Kabbalah, for example, teaches that certain words have a vibrational power that can alter one's perception of existence. In Sufism, there are stories of manuscripts that can only be read by those spiritually ready to receive them. And in secret societies of the Middle Ages, there was a belief that some books chose their readers, meaning that if an occult text found its way into your hands, perhaps it was not mere coincidence. Another intriguing theory comes from the notion of the Akashic records, which suggests that all knowledge of the universe already exists in an invisible dimension and that certain texts appear at specific moments to reveal fragments of this truth. If this is real, then the Liber Mortis would not be merely an artifact of the past, but something that manifests when the right conditions are met. This would explain why it has no definitive origin and why different cultures have accounts of similar books. But there is an even more unsettling detail. What if the game does not need players? We have always spoken of the Liber Mortis as if it were a trap for those who dare to open it. But what if the book's purpose is not just to capture souls? What if its mere existence in the physical world is already part of what it needs to fulfill its role? Perhaps the game is already in progress. Perhaps it has always been part of our reality, simply waiting for the next curious person to rediscover it. Whatever the case, there is something that cannot be ignored. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Now that we understand the true power of the Liber Mortis, there is only one last question left to ask. Is this book a human creation, or has it always existed, waiting for someone to find it again? Now that we comprehend the spiritual risks of this game, we must explore one final aspect: the power of words and the possibility that certain books can influence the mind and reality in ways we do not yet fully understand. After all, could the very act of reading the Liber Mortis be an unconscious ritual, activating forces beyond our comprehension? Whatever the answer may be, if history has taught us anything, it is that some mysteries are not meant to be uncovered. And if the Liber Mortis truly exists, perhaps its greatest secret is not what is written inside it, but what happens when you decide to turn its pages. If you are interested in exploring more about spirituality, I have specially selected some videos filled with deep knowledge and fascinating discoveries that you will love. Just click on one of them. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery and spiritual learning. Your commitment to knowledge is the first step toward transforming your reality.